My fiancée yelled at me, threw a rock at my Mercedes, and scratched it with a knife while screaming that I cheated. I didn't. She admitted she slept with her coworker to get even. I called the cops, showed them the footage. $3,200 in damages. They took her in barefoot, still screaming my name. I filed charges while she sat in holding. I pulled into the driveway just before 6 p.m., tired but glad the week was finally over. I had a client call that ran long and traffic had been miserable, but I was home, finally. I didn't expect to see Amanda standing barefoot on the lawn, holding something heavy and round in her hand. Her face looked unfamiliar, twisted, tense, flushed with rage. Before I could park, she flung the rock. It struck the driver's side door with a loud, hollow thud. I slammed the brakes. For a second, I thought she was aiming at me. The rock dropped and rolled to the concrete. I stepped out slowly, confused and cautious. She didn't speak at first. She was panting, shoulders tense, hands curled at her sides like claws. Then she let out a scream I've never heard from another human being. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't pain. It was fury. "You cheated on me," she shrieked so loud I could feel the vibration in my chest. "You think I wouldn't find out?" I opened my mouth to respond, but she didn't want an answer. She ran up to the car, pulled something from her back pocket, and slashed the paint across the hood with one smooth motion. The sound it made was sickening, metal on metal, a dry, high screech that made my ears ring. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't Amanda. The woman I knew didn't act out like this. She didn't break things. She didn't scream in public. But this person in front of me looked possessed. There was spit on her lips, her eyes glassy, darting around like she couldn't focus. I tried to move toward her, calm her down, maybe get the knife away before things got worse. "Don't touch me," she shouted. "You disgust me. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." Neighbors were starting to come out now. A couple across the street stood behind their screen door. Two teenagers from next door filmed from their driveway. I saw someone inside the house close the blinds. I asked her what she thought I did. She ignored the question. Instead, she bent down and picked up the rock again, now chipped at the edge from impact. Before she could raise her arm again, I took 2 steps back and told her I was calling the cops. That got her attention. "You'd call the police on me," she said, voice cracking, as if I had just betrayed her. "After what you did." I walked to the porch, phone already out. I didn't even have to dial. I used the emergency shortcut on my lock screen. I turned around and stood facing her as I talked to dispatch. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. I told them my fiancée had just vandalized my vehicle with a rock and a knife, and that she was still on the property, agitated and screaming. I gave my name and address. The dispatcher stayed on the line until I heard the sirens. Amanda didn't stop. She paced in circles on the lawn, alternating between crying and hurling accusations. She yelled things that didn't make sense. She mentioned names I didn't recognize. She brought up a party we went to 2 weeks ago and claimed I was flirting with my ex all night, even though the entire encounter was 2 minutes long and happened outside in plain view. Her logic was tangled, her rage incoherent. The rock was still in her hand when the first cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out. They approached cautiously, speaking in calm, measured tones. They told her to put the rock down. At first, she refused. Then she dropped it like it was burning her fingers. They kept their distance but guided her away from the driveway while I spoke to one of the other officers. I pointed out the damage. The dent, the deep white slash across the hood. I told them about the knife, which was still lying near the grass. One officer bent down and picked it up using gloves. He inspected it, nodded, and placed it in a bag. I told them I had home security footage that caught everything. Then came the hard part. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at Amanda, now seated on the curb, arms folded, glaring at me like I was the criminal. The neighborhood was still watching. Her feet were dusty, her hair a mess. She didn't look like someone who just made a mistake. She looked like someone who'd been planning this. I told them I wasn't sure yet. I said I wanted to show them the footage first. They told me that was fine, but they needed to document the damage and file a report anyway. It was already over the threshold for misdemeanor vandalism. One officer said, looking at the car, that it could easily top $3,000. Amanda heard that. She looked up and yelled, "Are you really doing this to me?" The officer gestured for her to stay quiet. She muttered something and started sobbing into her knees. They asked if we could go inside, somewhere they could review the footage. I nodded and led them in. As the screen loaded, my hands hovered over the mouse. This wasn't how I thought my evening would go. This wasn't even close. But I hadn't seen anything yet. Inside, I led the officers into the living room and booted up the tablet that linked to my home security system. The camera facing the driveway had the clearest angle. The footage started just before I arrived. Amanda already pacing barefoot, the rock in her hand. There was no audio from the camera, but you didn't need sound to understand the fury in her face. One officer leaned in closer when she hurled the rock at the car. The other noted the timestamp. Then came the moment where she took out the knife and dragged it across the hood. The light caught the blade just enough to leave no doubt what it was. The officers exchanged a glance. "Do you have audio inside the house?" one asked. I nodded. "Only near the front. Living room and kitchen." We pulled up the indoor feed. It had recorded from about 15 minutes ago. It showed Amanda pacing around, yelling to herself before I even pulled up. Once I entered the house and tried to calm her down, the audio kicked in clearly. Every word was crisp. Her accusations. Her shouting. My responses. Her voice breaking when she screamed that I made her feel worthless. Then came the part that changed everything. "I know you were with her. Don't lie. I saw the way you looked at her. You want to know something? I slept with Ryan from work. Just once. Just to make it fair." One officer paused the playback. "Who's Ryan?" he asked. "Her coworker," I said quietly. "I met him at the holiday party. Seemed like a nice guy. Guess I was wrong." They looked at each other again, this time with less doubt. One officer asked if I wanted to give a formal statement now or wait until I had legal counsel. I asked what that meant exactly. "Sir, you're the victim here," the older one said. "But she just confessed to property damage and admitted to doing it out of revenge for something that, based on your texts and this video, never even happened." "I didn't cheat," I said calmly. "No one's suggesting you did." They gave me a few minutes to breathe while they stepped outside. I didn't sit. I just stood there in the kitchen, trying to piece it together. Amanda and I had been together for 3 years. Engaged for 5 months. We had arguments, like anyone, but nothing like this. I always thought she was impulsive with her emotions, but I never imagined she'd lose control like that. Then I realized this wasn't just about jealousy. This was a spiral. A complete detachment from reality. When the officers came back in, they told me they'd documented the footage and damage. They again asked whether I wanted to proceed with charges. I didn't give them an answer. Not yet. Amanda was still outside, sitting against the cruiser now. Her knees were hugged to her chest. One of the neighbors brought out a blanket and placed it over her shoulders. She didn't thank them, just sat there, trembling, muttering something I couldn't hear. The younger officer asked if there was any history of violence between us. "No," I said immediately, then paused. "Not physical, but sometimes her emotions run away from her. I always chalked it up to stress." "Anything like this before?" I hesitated again. "There was a time last year she shattered a glass against the kitchen wall after we argued about me staying late at work. Another time she tossed her phone at the mirror and cracked it when I forgot to pick up her prescription. But this wasn't the same. This was public, calculated, violent." One of the officers suggested Amanda might need a mental health evaluation before anything else. But the damage to the car pushed this beyond a wellness check. It was property crime, plain and simple. And now, with the footage, they could also consider it premeditated. I asked if I could talk to her. Just for a minute. They agreed. One officer stood nearby while I walked out to where Amanda was sitting. She looked up at me like she didn't recognize me. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she asked. "I would have understood." "I didn't cheat," I said. "You made all this up in your head." She shook her head. "You were going to. I saw it in your eyes. At that party. You were talking to her behind my back." I talked to her for less than 2 minutes. In front of other people. Her expression changed. She didn't seem angry anymore. She seemed trapped. Like she knew there was no way to climb out of what she'd done. "Ryan meant nothing," she whispered. "It was just once." I felt sick afterward. I didn't respond. Not to that. There was nothing left to say. She looked at the car, the dented door, the deep gouge on the hood, the knife now sealed in an evidence bag. Then she looked back at me. "I can't take it back, can I?" "No," I said. I turned and walked back to the porch. The officer stepped forward again. She asked if I wanted to go ahead with formal charges. She told me the estimated damage was already over $3,000 and that Amanda had confessed on video. They had enough. I nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The older officer spoke into his radio. Within minutes, another patrol car arrived. They moved Amanda to the second vehicle. She didn't resist this time, but her face changed the moment she realized it was real. That this wasn't just a fight. This was an arrest. She screamed my name as they placed her in the back seat. "Daniel, you can't do this." I said I was sorry. She kicked at the door. The officer had to calm her down again before closing it. I watched the cruiser back out of the driveway. Her blanket was still on the ground. The neighbors retreated inside. The kids had stopped filming. Inside the house, everything was exactly where it had been earlier that morning. Except now the air felt sharp. The walls echoed with something else entirely. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked at my phone. 12 missed calls. 3 voicemails. Her mother. Her sister. A coworker I didn't even know she was still close with. I didn't listen to any of them. The paperwork was already started. Tomorrow, I'd go to the station and sign it in full. The ring was still in the hallway drawer. It would stay there for now. The next morning, I stood outside the police station with a folder in my hand. Inside were printed screenshots from the security footage, a flash drive with the video, and a formal estimate from the body shop I'd driven to first thing after sunrise. The guy there took one look at the car and didn't even flinch before saying, "You're looking at a minimum of $3,200. And that's if there's no internal panel damage under the gouge." The key fob still shook in my hand. Inside the station, the front desk officer greeted me without much enthusiasm. I said my name, and before I could finish explaining, she nodded and waved a younger officer forward. He walked me through a side hallway and into a back room, where we sat at a plain desk under flickering fluorescent lights. He didn't waste time. "Sir, the evidence you provided last night is clear. The suspect was processed, held overnight, and is being evaluated now. She's not being released until arraignment. We just need you to confirm your pressing charges and sign the statement." I pulled out the repair estimate and slid it across the table. Then I handed over the flash drive. "I'm not doing this out of spite," I said. "But if I'd thrown a rock through her windshield or keyed her car, I'd already be behind bars." He didn't argue. He just handed me the form. I read it line by line. I confirmed the timeline, the details, the property value. At the bottom, there was a signature line next to the charge: criminal mischief, 4th degree. They'd tacked on a second count for harassment, based on the verbal abuse and threats recorded on audio. I signed. That was it. Just ink on paper. But it felt like I'd sealed something shut. Like the last breath in a suffocating room had finally left. On my way out of the station, my phone buzzed. 8 missed calls. Amanda's mother. Then her sister. Then an unknown number. A voicemail popped up next. I played it on speaker in the car. "Daniel, this is Marcia. Amanda's mother. Look, I'm not excusing anything. But she wasn't well. You know that. Please don't do this. Please call me. I'm begging you." No apology. Just a plea to let it slide. The next voicemail was less polite. "This is ridiculous. She made a mistake. You're going to ruin her life over a car? Are you seriously this cold?" I didn't respond. I didn't delete the messages either. I drove home, pulled into the garage, and locked the door. My phone rang again. This time, it was Amanda's father. I let it ring out. Then came a text. "You think this makes you a man? Pressing charges on a woman? You need to grow up." No mention of what his daughter admitted. No mention of the rock, or the knife, or the cheating. Later that afternoon, I got another call, this one from Amanda's work. A woman named Tessa, who said she was the HR manager. She sounded uncomfortable. "Daniel, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to let you know that Amanda won't be returning to work until further notice. She listed you as her emergency contact." I stayed quiet. "She's currently undergoing a mandatory evaluation due to the circumstances of her arrest. We're initiating a leave of absence protocol. Ryan, her coworker, he's also taken leave. He came in this morning looking like he hadn't slept in days." I asked if Amanda had told anyone at work what happened. Tessa paused. "Not the full story, but the way things are circulating. People know something went wrong. HR is staying neutral, but you should be prepared for fallout." Fallout. That was the word everyone was avoiding. She'd done this. She'd taken a knife to a car and slept with someone out of pure spite. She'd screamed at me in the driveway in front of the entire neighborhood. She'd confessed on camera. And now that the consequences were hitting, everyone suddenly wanted to soften the blow. Around 5 p.m., I got a knock at the door. It was Amanda's sister. She stood on the porch with sunglasses and a tight jaw. No small talk. No fake smile. "She wants her things," she said. "She said you packed them." "I did," I replied. "They're in the garage. I'll open it. You can take whatever you can carry. The rest I'll ship to your mom's place." She hesitated for a second, then followed me around the side. I opened the garage. For boxes sat near the wall, neatly sealed, labeled with a marker: clothes, bathroom, books, misc. On top of one box was a jewelry tray. I placed the engagement ring inside, next to her bracelet and earrings. The sister stared at it. "She really didn't think you'd go through with it," she said finally. I didn't think she'd go through with what she did either. She didn't argue, just picked up 2 boxes and left. Before she got into the car, she turned and said, "You know she's not okay, right?" "I know, but that's not an excuse." As she drove off, I noticed the kids across the street had drawn something on the sidewalk. A cartoonish car with a massive red X through it and a stick figure yelling with wild hair. Beneath it was written in chalk, "Crazy Lady Rex Benz." I didn't smile, not because it wasn't accurate, but because it reminded me that everything about my life was now on display. The footage had already made its rounds in the neighborhood. Someone even uploaded a blurry clip from across the street. It had no audio, but the comments were relentless. "This guy's dead inside. She really thought he wouldn't call the cops? This generation has no idea what consequences are. Damn, not the Benz. The next morning, I got a call from the detective handling the follow-up. We've processed the evidence. She'll be held through the weekend. Her arraignment's set for Monday. If she makes bail, you'll be notified. If she pleads out, you'll be contacted about restitution. Restitution? $3,000's worth of damage. You're legally entitled to be reimbursed. If she doesn't pay, she'll face civil penalties. And if I don't want restitution, he paused. You can waive it. But based on the damage in her admission, it's unlikely a judge will let her walk without something on record. I told him I understood. Before hanging up, he added, you did the right thing. Not easy, but necessary. It didn't feel like the right thing. Not yet. But I knew what it would have meant if I hadn't done it. If I had let her walk. If I had kept the footage to myself. If I had let people keep thinking I deserved what she did because of some imaginary betrayal. Amanda was still in holding. Her shoes were probably still in that cruiser, if they hadn't already been tossed in an evidence bin. She'd be arraigned in an orange jumpsuit, in front of strangers, with a public defender. It wasn't the future I ever pictured for us, but it was the one she built with her own hands. And a rock. And a knife. By Monday morning, Amanda had been in holding for 2.5 days. Her name hadn't hit the news, but our neighborhood might as well have been its own gossip network. My phone buzzed every few hours, voicemails from her friends, texts from coworkers I barely knew, half-hearted apologies from people who suddenly wanted to play mediator. The arraignment happened at 10 a.m. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I'd already submitted everything. The footage, the repair estimate, the signed charges. My part was done. The system would handle the rest. Amanda pled not guilty. Her court-appointed attorney tried to argue temporary emotional distress and an unstable mental state. The footage made that difficult. The footage didn't just show a breakdown. It showed preparation. A deliberate walk to the driveway. The weight of the rock in her hand. The pocket knife drawn with a slow, controlled grip. The admission of infidelity in her own voice. The judge granted bail, but not without hesitation. A mental health evaluation was ordered before release. She was remanded until it was complete. Her family went quiet after that. No more calls. No more texts. No one came to pick up the rest of her things. The remaining boxes sat untouched in the garage. I considered dropping them off at her parents' place, but I knew how that would go. They'd see it as a final insult. They'd twist the narrative again, paint me as vindictive for returning what didn't belong to me anymore. Instead, I locked the garage and left them where they were. 2 days later, I received a certified letter. Amanda's attorney. She was seeking mediation for property division, for remaining finances, for the return of shared items. There was no mention of the vandalism, the footage, the arrest. Just cold legal language about assets and closure. The irony didn't escape me. She didn't want closure when she threw a rock at my car. She didn't want mediation when she dragged a knife across the hood. She wanted chaos. She wanted punishment. Now, with the weight of charges behind her, she wanted terms. I met with a lawyer. We drafted a response. The engagement was over. No shared property remained. I wasn't seeking financial damages beyond the car repairs. And I had already changed every lock, revoked access to every account, and informed every mutual friend that I didn't want to be contacted again about her. The attorney nodded, saying it was the cleanest breakup he'd seen in months. Messy on the outside, airtight on paper. The next week, the body shop called. The car was ready. I picked it up, signed the receipt, and scanned the total. $3,243.17. They handed me a copy for court. I emailed it to the detective the same afternoon. He confirmed that it had been added to the case file. That night, I sat on the back patio alone. I didn't play music. I didn't check my phone. I just sat with the knowledge that I had done everything the way I was supposed to. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't retaliated. I hadn't made threats. I had simply responded with evidence, with facts, with legal steps. And somehow, that made me the villain in the eyes of her family. They had sent one final message, days earlier. A voicemail, this time from her father. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't admit she was wrong. He said that I'd crossed a line by involving the police, that I should have kept it private, that real men don't ruin women with paperwork. But I knew what would have happened if I hadn't called. If I had let her destroy the car, scream in my face, throw around accusations, and then welcomed her back like nothing happened, she would have taken that as permission. Next time, it wouldn't be a rock. It would be a smashed window, or my phone snapped in half, or someone else she'd sleep with out of revenge. This wasn't about one night. It was about a line she crossed with her eyes open. Amanda was released on bond 10 days after the incident. The evaluation said she wasn't a threat to herself or others, but recommended therapy. She returned to her parents' house. I found out through a friend of a friend who still worked with her. Her job was gone. Ryan had resigned. Apparently, things at work had turned sour fast. Someone leaked the footage from my driveway. It wasn't hard. One of the neighbors had already posted it online. HR launched an internal review. The company wanted nothing to do with the drama. They cut ties clean. Amanda tried to reach out once. Through email. She didn't mention what she'd done. She didn't apologize. She said she hoped I would one day understand. That everything she did came from pain. That she still loved me, but knew I wouldn't believe that. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She had chosen violence, both emotional and physical, and expected me to carry the weight of both. But I didn't owe her anything. Not after what she admitted, not after the damage, not after the arrest. The final hearing is scheduled for next month. My lawyer will attend. I won't have to speak. All I'll do is submit receipts. For repairs. For the security upgrade. For the locksmith fees. For everything I had to clean up after she lit a fire and walked away from the smoke. The day before her arrest, I still thought we might have had a future. I still believed there was something worth saving. Now, I can't even remember what that feeling was like. Not because I've blocked it out, but because whatever it was, didn't survive the sound of metal being carved open while someone screamed lies at full volume in a driveway that used to feel like home. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.